Hey, friends of Intrepid, welcome to our live virtual programming this afternoon. I just got a really quickie program, our airplane of the month. This time we're going to do a helicopter. I want to thank you for joining us, and I look forward to hearing your questions at the end, and I'll try to get to as many as I can. So feel free to just, pop them down in there, and we'll weed them out and pop them up on a screen. The museum's live streams are free. And if you'd like to support us in delivering this exciting content, please click on the link below and in the description and see how you can help us, or go to our website, intrepidmuseum.org. We recently reopened just last Thursday, and things are looking up. Of course, there's all the COVID protocols still in place, so be careful out there. Come, bring your mask and come join us. We're finally open. It's kind of limited. We're not letting anybody inside the Concorde or inside the Submarine just yet, but there's plenty to see and do at Intrepid these days. Once again, I'm Eric Boehm, the Curator of Aviation. I'm coming to you in my basement workshop once again to talk about the Piasecki HUP Retriever helicopter. And this has got a lot of fun stories behind it. Really, this was not here. This is the first acquisition that I made to add to the collection when I arrived. I arrived 16 years ago almost to Intrepid, and this was a big hole in our collection. And ever since the first day I arrived, I identified the holes in the collection and been trying to fill those holes with the proper aircraft ever since. And this was the first one I was able to find. There it is right there. Believe it or not, I found this photograph, and I found a couple of photographs of the very machine that we have on display. I'll talk about more of that in a minute. But let's talk about this wonderful little helicopter. The Piasecki HUP, that's helicopter utility, Piasecki in the old Navy designation system prior to 1962, when they had the manufacturer's code still included. So HUP, it was called the Retriever officially. Yet to meet anybody who has ever called it that, who ever served with it or flew with it. They always called it the Hup. And it was designed by aeronautical engineer Frank Piasecki. And he was one of really the pioneers of helicopters. Of course, you had Sikorsky and Bell helicopters were all doing their things. But right up in there was the Piasecki firm. And they kind of got a jump on helicopters with this twin rotor system. Now that dude only has one engine. There's a radial engine, a 9-cylinder radial gasoline engine, right about where the star and bar is there on the side of the fuselage, right in the middle there. And it goes up into a transmission and two drive shafts. One goes forward and one goes aft and up. And those two counter-rotating propellers, one spins in one direction, the other one spins in the other direction to do away with that torque problem that helicopters have. And but he really patented this approach to helicopter design. He actually had a design before this one called the Rescuer, the HRP Rescuer, which was huge. It could carry 10 people, and but it was too big for aircraft carriers. In fact, the Navy painted them yellow, and it got the nickname the Flying Banana. I don't even have a photograph of it. Go ahead and look that up. The HRP Rescuer, the Flying Banana. Silly looking thing, but he had to really make this thing compact. He had to get this thing down to a smaller size to fit on aircraft carrier elevators because, during World War II, during carrier operations, there was always a destroyer, a smaller vessel shadowing the aircraft carrier to help with any problems pilots might have during flight operations, takeoffs and landings. Accidents were not super rare. It happened. It happened more often than we like to think about. But a pilot in the drink shortly after takeoff, or having a problem on approach, maybe coming back with a damaged airplane, not landing on the deck, but landing alongside, it was really great to have somebody pull you out of the water. So moving into the later 1940s and 1950s, the helicopter was really getting sorted out. Helicopters were flown during World War II in a very limited sense, but they were available. And there was some limited missions during World War II. That's a whole nother story. But they were not used on aircraft carriers until the late 1940s and into the 50s, and ever since. And one of the great things that this helicopter could do, it could launch and loiter alongside the aircraft carrier while flight operations are going on. And anytime it was needed, it was Johnny on the spot and in there instantly to help with that pilot. This photograph shows a Hup obviously pulling somebody out of the water. You can see him kind of limp there in that horseshoe collar being hoisted up. What I want you to take a look at, though, this might be a better picture, is you can see that that person is being hoisted up into the very forward part of the helicopter and through a trap door in the bottom. You can see the door open there. The helicopter was so small and rather underpowered. Like I said, it only had that one Continental R975 radial engine in there. It didn't have a lot of power. You could probably carry the pilot, the co-pilot, and maybe 2 or 3 people in the back. And if you were going to pick up somebody, you probably had to leave somebody home because you just didn't have the power. And not only that, the problem with this thing being so short, balance was critical. And so the hoist, there's an electric hoist with a cable that lowers that horseshoe collar. It had to be as far forward as they could get it. It's essentially inside the cockpit with the pilot and co-pilot. And in order to lower it, the co-pilot would have to get out of his seat, fold it forward. You can almost see it through the glazing in the window there. Fold it forward out of the way, swing the trap door down, and then lower the hoist down through to retrieve the pilot or the person who they were picking up, and then bring them up. And now, not an ideal situation. What Piasecki did design, made this thing really innovative, was, of course, it's ideal to have that pilot in command and a backup pilot, a pilot and a co-pilot, right next to each other during really stressful situations. You're picking somebody up out of the water. It's probably bad weather. It's probably dark. It's night. It's really great to have 2 people with their eyes on the controls and their hands on the controls. Wasn't possible with the Hup because that co-pilot had to get out of the seat and fold it up and get out of the way. So what Piasecki helped develop was one of the very first autopilots for helicopters, and it assisted that single pilot in the hover because it's a crucial period while you're hovering over somebody you're going to pick up to kind of keep it steady right there. And that autopilot assisted in that system, just wonderful. And of course, retrievers were used for everything, utility duties. I actually spoke to a chaplain from back in the day, and he was stationed on Intrepid, and he would fly out to the other ships where they would drop him off so he could do church services on the other ships. Liaison work, search and rescue, of course, supply replenishment, and that all-important plane guard duty, which I already talked about. And that really is the heart of the system, is that electric hoist that's mounted internally there between the pilots. There was only about 339 of these things ever built, so they're kind of rare. They were used by both the Canadian and the French navies, as well as the U.S. Army. The Army called it the H-25 Mule, which is kind of funny because soon after that, the Army got into the habit of naming all their helicopters after Native American Indian tribes. If you notice that picture I had back here, that one, number 56 with that big shield on the tail, that is actually the helicopter on display at Intrepid. Of course, it doesn't look like that because I did not find these photographs in time. These photographs I painted that helicopter going back close to 15 years now. But just a few years ago, I found this photo. It's a little fuzzy to see, and I wasn't too sure that the bureau number matched. The bureau number is a 6-digit number on the tail that you can hardly see in that photograph. But then I found this photo in the National Archives. And this is with HU-2, Helicopter Utility Squadron 2, which was stationed down in Naval Air Station Lakehurst, right here in New Jersey. And HU-2 supplied all the detachments of helicopter, 2 or 3 machines, handful of pilots, and of course the ground crew and the air crewmen that needed to be with it. But they would service all the carriers on in the Atlantic Fleet when they went on deployments. And HU-1 was stationed out on the West Coast, and they did the same thing out there. They sent detachments out to any of the Pacific Coast, the Pacific Ocean Fleet. But HU-2 right here would actually send helicopters out to Intrepid when Intrepid went on deployments and cruises. But when I found the logbooks, I got into the Smithsonian archives, and I was able to find the logbooks for this helicopter. And it served, believe it or not, on 10 different aircraft carriers and one battleship. It actually served on the battleship New Jersey briefly. There's a small landing deck in later years on the New Jersey. But it did not serve on Intrepid, which was just heartbreaking. But it served, it seemed like every single aircraft carrier in the fleet other than Intrepid. But still, these machines are very hard to find. And when I arrived 16 years ago, we did not have one. I was approached immediately by former crew members of the Intrepid. The former crew member association on Intrepid is very strong, and there's a lot of local members. Maybe some of you are listening right now. A lot of local members in the New York area. Just wonderful group of guys. But boy, they ganged up on me and said, "You got to get a Hup." And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to try to find one. I already had it on my list. This was one of the holes in the collection." And I found one, and it was in a junkyard in Nevada. And I called out there, and it was laying on its side. All the windows and the bubble on the front was all broken out. It was painted this really crummy shade of saffron yellow and pale blue. It was owned privately. After its Navy career, it was purchased by somebody who used it as a crop duster. And it ended up in this junkyard out west, and it was pretty forlorn. It was kind of battered. That tail surface area where you see the letter UR and that big shield with the flying penguin on it, that's the unofficial shield of HU-2. That whole area is covered with fabric to save weight. It's a metal frame, but it's covered with fabric. There's, it's very strong aluminum in the front to hold the drive shaft up to the aft rotor, but that 2/3 of that vertical surface is just fabric covered, like in the old-fashioned ways that biplanes were. And all the fabric was gone. The tail wheel was missing. There was still parts of it attached to it that were part of the crop dusting spray system, and it was just junk. And it was about to be carted off to be scrapped. And I got to it just in time. And I found out the guy wanted just a few $100s for it. Whatever the aluminum scrap value was is what he was selling it for. And all I had to do was match the price that the aluminum scrapper was about to pay him to take it away. And I went to the former crew members association and said, "Hey, I found one. It's in bad shape. It's going to need a lot of love, but it's going to cost this much." And it actually cost more to put it on a truck and bring it back east than it did to purchase the carcass. And I even haggled the price a little bit with them. I said, "Hey, the engine's still in there. That's not scrap aluminum." I wanted that subtracted, so I actually saved a few bucks. That was a pretty bold move, I think. I do say so myself. But this that 128519, you can see the bureau number clearly in this picture. That is the same exact machine on Intrepid, and you saw in the first picture. I do not have it painted this way because I was not able to find historic photos of it until well after the fact, years after we repainted that. And this photo in its natural, in its high resolution form, I can actually read all that stenciling. You see white stenciling all over it. I'm going to be able to reproduce all that. It's very low on our priority list. We have a lot of airplanes at Intrepid. Most of them are outdoors, and they are kind of, the outdoor airplanes need a lot of attention. They go through a regular cycle of corrosion mitigation, corrosion control, and repaints. And so someday, hopefully, we'll have a little break in the action where we can get this helicopter, roll it out onto our aircraft elevator, and bring it up to the aircraft restoration hangar and fix the paint job, get the proper number on it, get the proper stencils on it, and hand paint that penguin on both sides of the fin. Be a lot of fun. Some of the other fun stories that I could tell you about this helicopter. I'm going to show you a little video, give you more details about the helicopter, but the fun stories that I don't talk about in the video. See the tail wheel on that thing. It's a solid rubber tail wheel. These helicopters aren't known for taxiing a whole lot. Of course, they have to taxi if they land somewhere and have to move along the ground. So they are able to taxi like a standard airplane is, but they don't have an inflatable tire on the back. That's a solid rubber tire, and it was missing. And I looked everywhere. There was, at the time, 15 years ago, there was one flyable Hup left in the world. And it was out in San Diego, and that gentleman did not have any spare parts that he was willing to part with. He did not have a tail wheel anyway. And so that was a dead end. And then I found another gentleman here in the United States that has a survivor that's not flyable that he hopes one day too, and this is 15 years ago, that he hopes one day, and it still has not happened, to get it flyable again. He may have lost interest, or maybe ran out of money, or maybe had some trouble with the FAA, or maybe trouble with parts. But he said that tail wheel, actually, the spec on that matches the spec of a certain type of wheel used on roller coasters in amusement parks. And I could not believe it. He showed me the paperwork, and he was right. It's just a solid rubber, commercially available solid rubber tire on an aluminum casted wheel. And I was able to purchase one on eBay for about 20 bucks. And that replaced my tail wheel. And the gentleman that turned me on to that, he had actually bought one also from the same vendor for his Hup restoration. So that was kind of a fun story with that. The other one has to do with the rotor blades. If you see, the rotor blades came with it, and they were in pretty good shape. They were in a separate box. They were removed when we shipped it. And when we went to put the helicopter back together, we had it all painted and pretty and ready to set it up. And we have it set up in the hangar deck. And you might have saw that first picture, and I'll show that picture again here in a moment, that the rotor blades are all folded. And there's special racks that hold the blade in the folded position. And you just have to pull a pin, take the nut off of it and pull it, and then it pivots on the main bolt. And I was missing the main bolts. Now, I'm not going to fly this thing. I could probably go to the hardware store locally and get some maybe grade 8 steel bolts of the good enough size that will hold the rotor blades on sufficiently for our display purposes. But in all my research, I was looking and reaching out to any helicopter collectors I could find, including the Piasecki company, which is still in business, not making helicopters anymore, but they make components of helicopters. And through them, I found the son of the designer. Frank Piasecki was the designer. I found his son. I think he's Frank Jr., if my memory serves me correctly. And he lives right here in New York City. At the time, I think he was a stockbroker downtown or something. He was a businessman here in New York City, and he had connections with the company. And he made a phone call for me. And the plant that's still in Pennsylvania, the Piasecki plant, actually dug out the old drawings, the old engineering drawings for this helicopter, found the specs on the rotor bolts, and they made me a brand new set. So I had 6 brand new bolts shipped to me, and these are essentially, they're not original for this helicopter, but they're made in the same factory where the originals were made. So I thought that was really cool to have these essentially flyable wing bolt or rotor bolts that I could use. And boy, they were really a tight fit and really hard to put together, but we got it. We overcame that. And that was just a fun story with that one. The other story I always like to tell, I mentioned the former crew members, were hounding me about this. And when I told them I found one, they passed the hat around. And believe it or not, they raised thousands of dollars of private funds amongst themselves to realize that we could bring this helicopter to Intrepid and fulfill their need to show off, something they worked on or flew in. It was really very heartwarming. It was a lot of fun and a great project, but sometimes that's the way you got to do it. I'm going to show you a quick video. This is a video we made, once again, pre-pandemic, when I had short hair. Let me run in here. Hi, I'm Eric Boehm, Curator of Aviation here at the Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum. And today we're on the hangar deck, and we're going to take a look at a truly remarkable machine for its day, the Piasecki HUP Retriever. Frank Piasecki designed the HUP to meet a 1945 Navy requirement for a general utility helicopter to serve on aircraft carriers and other vessels. The intended use was for search and rescue, to act as plane guard, and also for general transportation work. HUP entered service with the Navy and the Marine Corps in 1949. The tandem 3-bladed rotors overlapped for optimum lifting efficiency and for making the helicopter compact. They were driven by a single radial-type engine through 2 transmissions. They counter-rotated, which means they spin in opposite directions to help eliminate torque. The HUP was rugged and built to withstand higher load factors than previous helicopters. It was the first helicopter to perform a loop, although unintentionally. The second version of the HUP was the first production helicopter to be equipped with an autopilot. This enabled hands-off flying and even hovering. Plane guard mission is critical to carrier operations.
Before the use of helicopters like the HUP, that service was performed by smaller ships. Helicopters had a much quicker reaction time for downed pilots in distress. The co-pilot seat folds forward, and a hatch in the belly opens to allow an electronically operated hoist with rescue sling to be lowered to downed pilots.
After 20 years of service and saving countless lives, the HUP was finally retired from the French Navy in 1965. For more behind-the-scenes videos, visit intrepidmuseum.org.
So there you have it. I would love to entertain your questions. That's our little HUP, and there it is. How it what does we got our first question here? What does HUP stand for? In the old Navy designation system, which started before World War II, through World War II into the 1950s, they didn't fix this until 1962. But the way they designated things, there was A for attack and F for fighter and things like that. But H for helicopter. This is helicopter, utility, Piasecki. Now, if Piasecki was to design another utility helicopter, a completely different machine, it would have been called the HU-2P. And this is actually an HUP-2. So the dash number was some modification. I'm not sure what it was that made it the -2, but some improvement to the basic machine. It's still the same machine, but with the modifications. So this is a -2 version. They did have a -3 version that had a more powerful engine before they retired them. Why is this particular helicopter so rare? Because they didn't make a lot of them, and they only made 339, and that includes ones for Canada and for France. They just didn't use them very often. They were on carriers for the most part. The Army had them. The Army found it kind of lacking in power for what they wanted to do, because you could only carry a couple of guys and a little bit of cargo. And the Army was looking for something and carry a whole lot of armed guys and even bigger helicopters to carry big stuff. So it just, and you're also looking at, late 1940s. This is 1948. This thing came out of Frank Piasecki's head. So even before the Korean War, and in that period of time, late 40s, the 50s, jet technology, we talk about, jet fighter technology is just constantly evolving. There was airplanes rolling off the assembly line. They were obsolete before they were built because there was something better that somebody else designed. The same thing was going on with helicopters. When you get into the 1950s, you're no longer flying things with reciprocating engines. You're getting into the jet turbines, and the Huey helicopter came out in the very late 50s, 1958, 59, when the Huey debuted. You're now jet turbines, so turbine engines were going to be taking over. So just not a lot of them. Daddy Marks asked, what was the primary utility helicopter used by the U.S. Navy after this helicopter? There was a few, but primarily the Sikorsky H3 series debuted, and that was a turbine engine. There was other helicopters. There were several helicopters that were tried out. The HRS, Sikorsky HRS, which we do have one of those on display. You might know that one as the big bulbous nose. It also has a gasoline-powered reciprocating engine in the nose, a radial engine in the nose, but more of a conventional configuration with the smaller tail rotor. Also called the H-19 after 1962, that HRS was. And then the H-34, which looked very similar, but they did away with the 4 landing gear. There was 4-point landing gear on the HRS, which ended up being kind of dangerous. That's going to be a whole nother story I'll talk about when I do that helicopter for Aircraft of the Month. But something about having 3 rotor blades and 4 points to land on created up a vibration harmonic that was not healthy for the airframe. So the H-34 got a more powerful engine. They did away with the 4 landing gear and only had 2 in the front and moved a tail wheel onto it. They lowered the tail so it can have a tail wheel. What else was used? But it was really the H3 series. And if you want to know what the H3 series, it's the Sea Kings. Look at any of the Apollo moon landing rescues, not rescues, but recoveries after the splashdowns. Those are all HS3s. And HS-3s would serve on Intrepid later after the Vietnam War, getting into the late 19. Is there a funny story behind the penguin on the tail of the helicopter? I bet there is. And, you know, I've actually asked guys about it. And one of the former crew members is sadly no longer with us, Marino DeLeo, whose name is actually, I put his name on the side there because he's the guy that helped raise the most money for that thing. And I asked him, he didn't really know. It was just one of those cute things. Back in the 1950s, there was the standardization of logos and patches was taking hold. You know, going through this a little project regarding logos and patches, and some of the squadron logos in the 1940s were never really officially accepted by the Navy until later. And the same thing happened in the 50s. There was all these funny little characters, and these Navy guys, boy, they liked having fun with their little cartoon characters, but I really don't know the true backstory of why a penguin. I'm going to have to research that a little more. Was this helicopter ever used in combat? No. But if you consider pulling down pilots out of the water, it's a pretty stressful situation. So maybe not getting shot at, but definitely doing some dangerous work. Helicopters of this era were probably, I don't want to say they were dangerous to fly. They were still a technology in its infancy. The guys that flew this particular helicopter had remarkable reliability for the time frame it comes from. Wonderful little helicopter, but combat, no, not so much, but still a Cold Warrior. The Cold War era is this helicopter's use. How did you transport the helicopter across the country to Intrepid? Dead easy. It was so easy because this thing is so small and compact without the rotor blades on it. And you can see in this photograph, let me enlarge that for you. So the rotors could fold, but they weren't even attached at the time, so we didn't have to worry about them. But that fit on a flatbed truck perfectly fine. This machine is only about, it's less than 60 foot long. I want to say it's 56-ish feet long. So we had a long flatbed truck, and the width was within legal limits for the road. I don't even remember needing special permits for it. It wasn't particularly high on the trailer, and it wasn't wide. So it was probably the easiest aircraft move we ever had. The big challenge was those 4 curved panels that you see on the front there, the plexiglass nose of this thing. They were all busted out. And if you look at that, you're thinking, especially those 2 bottom ones, is kind of like a compound curve. And it looks very complicated. And I have this wonderful acrylic plastic provider for air. He's called Airplane Plastics. So I'm going to do a little commercial for him. He's not paying me for this. Airplane Plastics in Tip City, Ohio. They make a lot of plastic canopies and things for home-built airplanes. And they do all my acrylic work, because acrylic work is very, very demanding. You have to have molds and you have to do things. It's a complicated thing, and I just don't have the equipment for it. So it's much easier to contract him. And he has made canopies for, I want to say, including this helicopter, probably 5 other aircraft and this helicopter. Oh yeah, and the Coast Guard helicopter as well. So he's replaced a lot of plastic for us. But he looked at that and said, yeah, it's going to be really expensive because those parts are all compound curves and this and that, and it's going to be an expensive mold. And I was going into fundraising mode, and it looked like this helicopter would have to be backburnered as far as the restoration went. And he called me up one day and he said, you know, I'm looking at that. And just the geometry of it, I think I can drape form that. If anybody knows anything about making something molded out of plexiglass, you can have a very complicated mold. Usually you need a large vacuum form machine where you'll pull this thing around a mold in a very complex compound shaped way. Drape forming is dead easy. You usually have a curve in one axis. It's just a curved piece of metal. You cover it with a piece of felt so your plastic doesn't get marked up by it. You'll warm up your plastic in a large oven, and you just lay it on this curved piece of metal. And I said, yeah, how can that be drape formed? It looks like a compound curve. He said, I think looks are deceiving. He says, I think I can drape form that. And lo and behold, he could, and he made all 4 of these. I don't remember what it cost, but I had it. It was actually in my budget. It was well within the budget we had to restore this helicopter, and I couldn't believe it. It was just this. It was really a gift to have this happen. I know I kind of got off track with your question there, but I just had to tell that story when I was looking at the bubbles on the nose. Questions? How much restoration work went into the Piasecki at Intrepid? Well, you know, this helicopter was living in the desert as it was. Internally, there was no corrosion. This thing had a career serving in the fleet, serving out in the ocean. You would think the salt water would have attacked it. It probably did, but the maintenance crews did their jobs. The gentleman, I don't know the name of the gentleman who used it for crop dusting work and agricultural work, but he obviously took pretty good care of it. It did get old and got forlorn. It got left in the desert, which is the ideal place to leave it in that hot, dry desert environment. And there was just absolutely no corrosion on the inside. We did put some preservative in the engine. We don't run the engine, of course, but most of the external was just easy to clean. A little bit of bead blasting went on, coat of primer, coat of paint, markings, and of course that all important plastic pieces. It was remarkably one of the easiest restoration jobs since I've been at Intrepid. So I wish I had more I wish more things would come to us like this in this good a shape. This is the last question. What kind of helicopter does the Navy use currently for search and rescue missions? Good question. I think they're using the SH-60s, which is in the Black Hawk family. The Navy calls it the Black Hawk. The Air Force calls it the Pave Hawk. I think it's called the Seahawk in the Navy. But last I looked, they're using the 60 series, and that's a Sikorsky product. And of course, now they're also looking into using the Osprey. The V-22. I know the Air Force is going to be retiring their H-60s. And I was actually in an H-60 Pavehawk squadron when I was in the Air Force. I was the first sergeant of the 48th Rescue Squadron back in the late 90s. And when we went over to Kuwait a couple times, we took our H-60s over there. But the Air Force is phasing out of the H-60 business and going to be using the V-22 Osprey. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. The V-22 Osprey that's the big tilt rotor thing. It's got the big engines on the end of the wings there, and they tilt to rise vertically and then go horizontal to fly really, really fast. I hope I answered your questions. If you have any more questions, leave them in the, if you're on YouTube or Facebook, you can leave them in the chat there, and I should see them, and then I can answer them directly. Thank you for watching and sharing your questions. The museum has introduced a number of new live streams. Please follow and subscribe to this channel, or visit our website. That's Intrepid Museum, one word, intrepidmuseum.org, for the latest streaming schedule. Lots of great programs. The education department is doing things. The collections department is putting things live. Everybody's having a lot of fun. A lot of us are working from home and just getting this fun stuff out there for you folks. If you're able, your donations of any amount would help keep programs free and or at low cost. And just go online and explore our membership options online. And I hope you enjoyed this, and have a good afternoon, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.